In 2015, the Open Science collaboration attempted to replicate 100 published psychology studies using the original researchers' own materials and larger sample sizes. Only 36% of the replications produced statistically significant results matching the original finding. This was not a scandal about fraud. It was a systemic revelation about how scientific incentives, statistical practices, and publication norms had quietly eroded the reliability of an entire field's evidence base. The Open Science collaboration, led by Brian Nosek, coordinated over 250 researchers to replicate 100 psychology studies published in top journals, using materials and protocols as close to the original as possible with adequately powered sample sizes. Only 36% of replications achieved statistical significance matching the original study, and effect sizes in successful replications averaged about half the magnitude of the original findings. This landmark project, published in the journal Science, transformed replication from a niche methodological concern into psychology's central existential crisis. Social priming research, studies claiming that subtle environmental cues unconsciously influence behavior, such as walking more slowly after reading elderly-related words, suffered some of the most severe replication failures. Many textbook social priming findings, once considered foundational, failed to replicate in large, well-powered, pre-registered studies. Similar patterns emerged in ego depletion research, claiming that willpower is a depletable resource, and in power-posing research, claiming that expansive body postures cause hormonal and behavioral changes. These areas became case studies in how an entire subfield's foundational claims could rest on statistically fragile ground. P-hacking refers to the practice of exploiting the many small, seemingly reasonable decisions in data analysis, which variables to include, which outliers to exclude, when to stop collecting data, which subgroups to examine, until a statistically significant result emerges. Because researchers typically have many degrees of freedom in how they analyze data, trying enough combinations will eventually produce a significant p-value purely by chance, even when no real effect exists. P-hacking is rarely conscious fraud. It usually reflects researchers unconsciously following the data toward a publishable, significant result. Publication bias describes the strong tendency of academic journals to publish studies with significant, novel, positive findings while rejecting or discouraging submission of null results, studies that found no effect. This creates a systematic distortion in the published literature. Even if 95% of studies on an effect find nothing, the 5% that find something by chance are the ones that get published, creating a false impression that the effect is real and robust. The file drawer problem, describing all the unpublished null studies sitting in researchers' file drawers, captures this distortion vividly. Harking, hypothesizing after results are known, describes the practice of discovering an unexpected pattern in data and then writing the research paper as though that pattern had been the original hypothesis all along. This practice disguises exploratory, hypothesis-generating research as confirmatory, hypothesis-testing research, which misleads readers about how much confidence the finding deserves. Combined with p-hacking and publication bias, Harking helped fill the literature with findings that appeared far more robust and theoretically predicted than the underlying research process actually supported. Preregistration requires researchers to publicly commit to their hypotheses, sample size, and planned statistical analyses before collecting or examining any data, typically through a time-stamped registry like the Open Science framework. This eliminates the flexibility that enables p-hacking and harking, since any deviation from the pre-registered plan is transparent and must be disclosed. Pre-registered studies show substantially lower rates of statistically significant findings than non-pre-registered studies on the same topics. Direct evidence that undisclosed analytical flexibility was inflating the earlier literature's apparent success rate. Registered reports represent an even stronger reform. Journals review and accept a study's introduction and methodology before any data is collected, committing to publish the results regardless of whether they are significant or null. This directly eliminates publication bias, since the decision to publish is made before the outcome is known. Registered reports have been adopted by over 300 journals across multiple fields and have shown notably higher rates of null results being published, restoring the missing null findings that publication bias had long suppressed. The replication crisis produced a substantial, ongoing reform movement within psychology. Journals increasingly require larger, adequately powered samples rather than the underpowered studies common before 2015. Open data and open materials policies allow independent researchers to verify analyses and attempt replications more easily. Multi-lab collaborative replication projects now routinely test high-profile findings before they are treated as established fact. While painful, the replication crisis has made psychology's most recent findings substantially more trustworthy than those published in the pre-reform era. The replication crisis was not an indictment of psychology as a discipline. It was a demonstration of science working as it should, eventually correcting itself through transparency and rigor. Modern psychological findings that have survived pre-registered, well-powered replication deserve substantially more confidence than the field's pre-2015 literature, and that distinction matters for anyone consuming psychological research today.